David Frost here, and I have with me three men who are going to provide the landslide of laughter that we call Pull the Other One. They are Mr. Frank Carson, Mr. Bernie Clifton, and Mr. Ken Dodd. Our other contributors are the many people throughout the world who've been involved in bizarre events. People like businessman Sidney Dix, who showed no interest in physical exercise until he reached the age of 40, when he suddenly took up jogging. At first, pleased by her husband's newfound vigor, Mrs. Dix was delighted, but then she grew disenchanted as he stayed out longer and longer. Also, the timing began to worry her. Sidney would go out to jog at midnight, returning exhausted at 3 a.m. And curiously, before going out in singlet and shorts, he would carefully brush his hair and teeth and apply underarm deodorant. Mrs. Dix reluctantly employed an inquiry agent who discovered that Sidney's nightly runs took him no further than the next road, where he jogged into the home of divorcee Mrs. Peggy Knight. Alas, the Dix marriage ended in divorce.
I don't want to hear any more of that. I'm a practicing Catholic.
What are you practicing?
Well, being a Catholic.
He also has withdrawal symptoms.
Well, alas, the Dix marriage ended in divorce, and he had to pay his ex-wife £150 a week. She left court with these words, quote, "He fooled me for 18 months, so he had a good run for his money."
When I was 40, I went to see my doctor, and he said, if I were you, he said, I should take up athletics. I said, why? He said, you've got an iron deficiency. I said, how do you know? He said, your trousers need pressing.
Well...
I said to our doc, when I was 40, I turned to the doctor, I said, how do I stand? He said, I don't know, it's a miracle. He said, I'll tell you this, though, you said you should be playing professional football. He said, I said, how do you mean? He said, well, I think you're fit for FA. This is...
I would like to interject, if I may.
All right.
It's very important to say that my first appearance here for some time with the panel, since we last met, I did have the pleasure of attending the Palladium Theatre recently, and was in attendance at Mr. Dodd's...
I was amazed to find it open.
At Mr. Dodd's concert, Mr. Ken Dodd's concert. I must tell you, I had a wonderful time there at this concert.
Comedian.
It was 8 of the happiest hours I've ever spent in a film.
Oh, you were... Brilliant. You were there the night we did the short show.
Well, my wife does a lot of exercise climbing over me in the morning.
But I found it was...
In fact, just yesterday, she burnt her backside on the light bulb.
You
Right, on that
are very athletic, though, Frank. You are. Just stand up, let everybody see you, Frank. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to look at. He's what they call low-chested.
Right, on that happy note, we'll move on to Tall Tale number 1.
Okay.
And here it is. This is where we tell them part of the story, and we ask these wise men to explain what really occurred. Here's the first one. Japanese businessmen moving into the Midlands to set up a new Toyota car plant are determined not to feel out of place. To this end, they are receiving special coaching from a lecturer at Burton Technical College. What aspect of the British way of life are the Japanese so keen to master?
The Japanese are determined not to feel out of place in the Midlands. Of course the Japanese will feel out of place in the Midlands. I'd feel out of place in the Midlands. Once they get over the language barrier, they'll be all right. They can always learn it. They can learn English later. Well, I know what it is to feel out of place, believe me. Last week I was the guest speaker at a VAT convention.
Well, one of the things about Japanese is the first thing they do when they come into Heathrow, do you know that most of the Japanese in this country live in Harlow? They live in Harlow.
Harlow?
Yes, they come in out of Heathrow, go to the taxi and say, Harlow!
Do you know the one thing a Japanese businessman dreads, it's losing face. He'd have nowhere to put his glasses.
Yeah. I remember falling in love with a Japanese girl.
Yeah.
And I said, can I marry your daughter? He said, no.
Do that again, because that's what...
No.
I never knew you could speak Japanese.
I can speak 2 words in any language of the world. Ask me any language you want.
Swahili.
Coca-Cola. No.
Very good.
I said, I want to marry your daughter. He said, no.
Oh.
No can marry my daughter. She have Zachary disease. I said, what's Zachary disease? He said, her face, Zachary the same as mine.
Dear.
Well,
I must say, though,
I can find them. Yeah, you say about us who speaking Japanese. You know what Japanese is for nappy? Saki poo-poo.
The Japanese have a way of doing some things properly, everything properly. When they moved into Derby, the first thing they did, they brought their own restaurant. They have a Japanese restaurant on the outskirts of Derby. And on the very first week, the Derby dustbin man came round and he said to the owner, where's you been? And the bloke said, I've been to Tokyo. No, he said, where's you been? He said, I tell you, I've been to Tokyo. And the dustbin man said, no, where's your wheelie been? He said, I really been to Tokyo.
They are doing very well.
You notice one thing.
Yeah.
You notice the deficiency in Dodd's act here.
Did you know that the
I've got a
Japanese...
Japanese car. Very small.
The Japanese are doing so well over here.
Oh, they are.
I've got a Japanese car.
I've got one. Well, my car's so
Mine's
small.
mine's a terrible one. I call it Puff the Tragic Wagon.
Well, my Japanese car's so small, the glove compartment only holds 3 fingers.
Do you know, the Japanese are doing so well over here. There's a firm in the Japanese company in the Midlands. It's making the world's tiniest microcomputers. And they're doing so well, they're having to move into smaller premises.
The first thing they did when they got to Derby, actually, the Japanese, was to close the local laundry because they'd heard that the British like to strike when the iron's hot. It's not funny, but it proves I've thought about it.
The latest gadget that the Japanese have in their cars is an automatic choke. If the missus starts nagging you or interferes with your driving, a hand shoots out of the dashboard and grabs her by the throat.
Did I ever tell you the one about the fellow who showed me the Japanese hearing aid?
I believe you did. So can we move on to the next step? Go on, then. Go on, then.
Oh, I said...
It's your birthday.
It's the Japanese... Japanese hearing aid. It's a microchip system with 4 transistor batteries. It says, this is the best in the world, because we can't compete with the Japanese because of their engineering and their marketing and sales. And I said, it's terrific. I said, was it expensive? He says, 20 past 7.
Have you ever thought of taking up sumo wrestling?
I'll tell you what, I thought about giving up that gag, I'll tell you that, won't I?
A fella passed me on a Japanese motorbike the other day. 1000cc motorbike, and he passed me and he waved, stopped at the traffic lights in front of me and fell over. I jumped out of the car, picked him up, off we went. Next set of traffic lights, he stopped, he fell over. Picked him up again. This went on 3 times down the high street. I said, how long's this been happening? He said, ever since I sold the sidecar.
What aspect of British life do you think they're trying to master, then?
What aspect? It's a good word, that aspect. I was going to try to say that thing, aspects of love, but somebody had bunged the key all up. But what aspect of the British way of life are the Japs so keen to master? Tea breaks. I'll go for tea breaks.
Good thought.
I would think they'd go for mixing with the British population because Japanese are very
Shy.
offhand,
Right, Bernie?
I would say it would be the British pub. They want to get in.
Oh,
Yep.
Burton, of course, yeah, that's right.
Burton on track.
Mixing shandies.
Well, you're halfway there,
all of us.
All of us.
but no, particularly Bernard.
We're half right.
Yes, I've been told that
Because
before.
it's the local lingo in pubs that they most want to know about.
Oh,
Yeah,
180.
It's because they all learn English before they come here, standard English. But early arrivals were apparently baffled in the Burton area by being addressed as ducks, my dear, and love. And they wondered how to respond. They didn't understand. And so their overzealous bosses have insisted they learn popular English phrases so they can chat in an English pub without appearing
Well,
conspicuous?
you changed from so, but we're going to get him thumped. That.
Yes, indeed. And imagine asking the barman for a ragger and rhyme.
Move on, please.
So I think it's half a point to Bernie Clifton. Number 2, tall tale number 2. A town's entire police force was recently engaged non-stop for 48 hours seeking those responsible for a £3,000 smash-and-grab raid in which, happily, no one was hurt. Why, in these days of so much crime, did this one crime command such attention?
Well, you see, crime is big business these days. It's moving into the high-tech stuff. Smash and grabbers now have finally come up. They've come up with the answer to double glazing: 2 bricks. They're even counting their coppers at Scotland Yard.
Well, I have a friend of mine who's a criminal, and he's the best criminal I know. Yeah. He stole a car and actually kept up the payments.
Did you know that policemen these days, they've got to turn their hand and every other part of themselves to all sorts of ways of catching you?
Yes.
Do you know that policemen are allowed to dress up as ladies in order to trap curb crawlers, providing they don't keep the money?
And have you noticed how thieves are now so daring now? I mean, apparently last week some thieves broke into the police station in Chesterfield and stole the toilets. And apparently the police have got nothing to go on.
No,
I remember being stopped on the motorway doing 97 mile an hour. He said, you're doing 97 mile an hour. I said, could you make it 100? I'm trying to sell a motor.
But I think with all the thieving that's going on, that the police really need a sense of humour. I mean, wherever they are. I mean, one of them stopped me on the motorway.
Wait, one of those hats, they must have a sense of humour.
Absolutely. And he stopped me for speeding, and he gave me a ticket. And I said, what's this, a raffle? He said, yes, keep that. 2 more of those, you get a bike.
There's one thing...
I got Duddy done. I got you done at the airport.
Dear.
You ever remember that?
Ladies and gentlemen, he did.
One tell him.
No, I
it's true. It's true.
I stepped off a plane
from the Isle of Man
at Speke Airport in Liverpool and was arrested by 2 detectives and taken into and body stripped and searched and everything.
Yeah.
Because he put them up to it.
And then they said, we're going to bring you in to see the inspector. And they opened the door. And Duddy's standing in his knickers. And I said, "Get a cracker."
There's one thing a policeman in this country can never be successful at. No. Cautioning Frank Carson that he has the right to remain silent.
I love Duddy's quote, what's the difference between Frank Carson and the M1? You can turn off the M1.
Well, what is the problem here? What does it boil down to, Mr. Frost?
The problem is, why did a relatively small crime like this, £3,000, but it was smash and grab, but no violence, why did the police force, the local police force, go so wacko, 48 hours, non-stop, one crime? Why did it get so much attention?
Is it because, with the cost of building material soaring, that somebody threw a diamond necklace through the window of a builder's merchant and stole a bag of cement?
No, the smash and grab raid created a sensation because it took place on St. Mary's in the Scilly Isles, where crime hardly exists. And this was the biggest theft in living memory, and it totally occupied the island's one-man police force for 2 days. Until a man was charged. The other man, presumably on the island, was charged with it. Yeah. And so that was the reason.
The Scilly Isles. Don't politicians go to have their holidays there?
I tried crime. I went into a bank with a shotgun, and the manager said, "This is your first robbery, isn't it?" I said, "How did you know?" He said, "You've sawn the wrong end off the gun."
Right, at this point in the proceedings, we'll turn from tall tales now to problem corner. This is where our gurus here become wise men and offer advice on queries raised by listeners. The first is a heart cry from Mrs. Lewis in Kent. She writes, "Every afternoon our little girl runs home from school and switches on children's TV. 2 hours later my husband gets in, switches over for the weather and sits there till the end of the late-night film. This is definitely too much TV, and I'd get rid of the set if it weren't that I'm hooked on Neighbours. Is there any way we can break the habit?
Sell the TV and buy a video.
Well, I wouldn't like that to happen because I've got a new television series coming out soon called Looking Back in Ireland. Starts at 8:20 and finishes at 6:15.
What the lady could do is put a bit of a bit of spice, a bit of novelty. She could try bringing the microwave from the kitchen into the television room, put a couple of pork sausages in it, and shout, "How's this for Pinky and Perky?"
There's a new video recorder that's come out, and it's designed to cure you of television watching. It tapes the programs you don't like and plays them back when you're out.
I think what this lady should do, is as soon as the 6 o'clock news is finished, slip into a transparent nightie, smother herself with Chanel No. 5.
Oh, I love this. Keep going, Ken. Oh, I love this.
Float off to bed and wait. And if her husband is the man I think he is, he'll join her as soon as the late-night film's finished.
Oh, but they came to my house yesterday. The fellow said to me, show me your television license. And I showed him the license. He said, that's last year's license. I said, well, you're showing last year's Brickner.
Well, you see, I can remember the time... when children watched Muffin. Now they spent all the time staring at Crumpet.
See, so many people, they argue about these Aussie soaps, and personally, I think these Aussie soaps are remarkable. I mean, I was watching it last week, 2:30 in the afternoon. There was a fella on The Young Doctors having his appendix out. 5:30, same night, was playing cricket on Neighbours.
Well, let me just tell you about a story of the fellow who died and went to heaven. And St. Peter said, what have you done in life? He said, not a lot. He said, what's your job? He said, I'm a professor. He says, really? He says, yes. I have an IQ of 186. Oh, he says, go into the left there to Nostradamus and Galileo. They'll certainly love you. The next fellow says, what about you? He says, well, I have an IQ of 144. Really? He said, yes, well, you go into the left, he says, because you'll enjoy talking to Bernard Shaw, Penny, and Madame Curie. And the next fellow says, what's your IQ? He says, 43. He says, what's happening on Coronation Street?
You know, today, you couldn't talk like this because today is the anniversary of the man, John Yogi Bird,
right,
who invented got the idea for television. He got the idea for television when he saw his wife nagging him through the serving hatch from the kitchen.
Yes, well, now we all talk about television, how we hate it and so, but we all love it. Because my television set broke down 3 days ago. And it was so boring, you know. I even started talking to the wife.
Our next door neighbour, their television set broke down. They took it away to the repairers and used to visit it 3 times a day. But you see, it does ruin family life. I mean,
it does indeed, yeah.
You should think back
to my wife's a
Think back to the old days when all the family would be standing around the old piano in the front parlour,
singing hymns.
Everybody wishing they could play the blinking thing.
Yeah.
Christmas time when the entire family gets around the piano and everybody lifts it off the cat's tail.
All right, so find other activities
Yes.
to take your mind off television.
A good game of Rudo.
Yeah.
It's the same as Ludo, and you take all your clothes off to play it.
Yeah.
And now a problem from a lady in Eastbourne. My friend Maud keeps ringing me up and going on for hours. I've tried lots of excuses for hanging up after 10 minutes, but it never works. I even moved the phone near the front door so I could ring the bell and pretend it was the milkman. This was a failure as she asked to speak to the milkman. Is there any way of stopping Maud running on without offending her?
Well, the worst thing about telephones are all these phone credit cards you can get.
Yeah.
I mean, I used my kidney donor card by mistake. I kept getting the butchers.
When people ring Bernie Clifton up, he always says, I'll call you back. Then he says, you've got a terrible back. Even flashers are using the telephone in these winter nights. They ring up young ladies and describe themselves.
Yeah, well, listen, if that's anything to go by this evening...
Never go in, can I do me... My Irish obscene telephone call.
Yes.
All right.
The Irish obscene telephone call. I'm coming around to your house and directly. And I'm going to rip the nightie off you. And then I'm going to tear up your duvet. And then I'll take your stockings down and stop telling me the time when I'm talking to you.
A lady who lives near me, she got a heavy breathing phone call while she was having an asthma attack. And it went on for 5 minutes. At the end, the bloke said, "Did I ring you or did you ring me?"
The telephones they sell these days, they're marvellous. They're so intricate, they're all sort of electronic and trend. Our telephones home's got what they call a memory. You always remember to phone you up when you're in the bath.
The phone rang in the producer's office this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and Frank picked the phone up and he said, "I know it is," and put the phone down. And I said, "Who was that?" He said, "It was some woman said it was a long distance from Australia."
You know that... Did you know that today is the anniversary of Alexander Graham Bell, who made the very first ever telephone call?
Yes.
And who will ever forget that memorable moment when the voice replied to him, "The number you have dialed has been changed."
What about when Graham Bell and all these reporters, which having read the story, I could feel the hair standing on my neck when he walked into this room and all the reporters were there. And he lifted the phone and he said, "Hello?" And they all applauded. He said, No, that's not it." He looked up the light bulb and said, "Yes." Now, I forget the end of the story, but
I think...
it's neither here nor there. What I was doing there, friends, I was just trying out telling them that you were right in the first place. What was it you said, by the way, in the first place?
I think what this lady should do is get rid of the telephone and tell Maud to send smoke signals instead, and her arms will soon get tired.
It's a funny thing, isn't it, about telephones? Why is it when you get a wrong number, it's never engaged? And I don't think, David, we can leave this subject without mentioning car phones.
Oh, dear.
Because you see, I saw a man on the other day on the motorway. He was on the motorway doing about 80 miles an hour. He was on the phone in one hand, and the other hand, he's lighting a cigarette. And the police stopped him, and the policeman said, "Are you trying to kill yourself?" He said, "Don't be daft, I only smoke 5 a day."
Well, I got a phone call the other night, and the wife said, "Who was that?" I said, "It must be from the... it's from the Coast Guard." This is why. I said, he wanted to know if the coast was clear.
Right. Okay, having solved those human problems, we'll move on now to our next tall tale. It's a story hot off the presses. As work proceeds on the Channel Tunnel, British Rail is already looking for a special class of engine driver to take the trains from London to Paris. These new international engine drivers will need exceptional high-tech skills, must be prepared to work flexible hours, and will need one extra unusual qualification. What is the extra skill you'll need if you want to drive trains through the Channel Tunnel?
Diplomacy.
Yep, quite right, Ken.
I'm a great believer in international cooperation, providing we stay at home and do it. Now, I've always wanted to drive a steam engine, a steam locomotive.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, my eyes weren't far enough apart to see through the windows. But I'm all for this Channel Tunnel. I'm all for the rail link between Britain and France because we can annoy each other a lot faster. The only extra skill that a driver will need at the moment doing that sort of job will be able to hold his breath underwater for a long time. I think I think it was a wonderful event when we saw it on television news there, when the tunnel, when they have that little...
Put that thing...
tiny little 2-inch thing and an English tunneler reached through and throttled a Frenchman. I thought
Yeah, well, the Irish... As you know, the two Irishmen actually put in the tender for the tunnels. The Irish were the first to tunnel from Dover to Calais. And...
that's something you get on the bottom of your foot, by the way.
Yeah.
How much did they want for the job?
Well, they were able to do the job for 750 quid.
That's very cheap.
Well, it was, actually. One was going to start in Dover and the other was starting in Calais and dig towards each other. And the fellow said, what happens if you miss each other? He said, well, you've 2 tunnels for the price of 1. I think in order to be an engine driver there, you'd have to eat garlic that doesn't smell.
Do you know that British Rail is mentioned in the Bible?
It is now.
And then he made all creeping things.
I think the drivers are going to have to get used to French cuisine, aren't they? They're going to have to get used to ordering frogs' legs and stopping them kicking the chips off the plate.
What's this special skill you will need if you want to drive trains through the Channel Tunnel? Well, their trains go on a different side to us, don't they? So we'd have to learn to drive on the other side, of course.
Is it just a basic, a few French phrases?
That's it. It's a working knowledge of French, obviously, because if they stop suddenly in the middle of the tunnel, the train breaks down, the driver may need to lean out of his cab, ask a passing peasant where the heck he is. Exactly. Bernie Clifton, another point.
I'll just try a simple phrase. Did you know that if a French snail was to crawl up your trouser leg, it would be 3 weeks before you went, oh!
You done that gag 20 years ago.
I know.
And I'm surprised it's still got a laugh.
It's worth repeating.
Yes,
and here's a simple tall tale to end with. You're doing well. You're doing real well today. At a charity contest last August in Chichester, Sussex, 50 experts beat their foreheads on the ground for half an hour and chanted yoga incantations. After 30 minutes, something happened, and one of them was proclaimed the winner. What sort of contest was this, and what were they hoping to achieve? Bernie.
I saw a similar thing happening at the Palladium recently. No. After 4.5 hours, it was Ken's audience banging their heads on the seat saying, we give in, Ken, we give in.
I think this sort of meditation and all these yoga... Because I've tried this. I used to sleep on a bed of nails. Ruined my hot water bottle. And I remember this contest, well, because a man named Ramjam Singh won it by a short migraine. This was a national headache competition. It was sponsored by Fensick. And...
my heart goes out to these people that collect door-to-door. So, I mean, I always give when people come to our door for charity reasons. Somebody came to our door last week. No, I did.
You ignored me.
I didn't recognise you. Oh, no, somebody came to our door last week. They said they were collecting for a new swimming pool. I gave them a bucket of water.
This yogi who was teaching me, meditating, he said, have you tried the lotus position? I said, well, it takes me all my time in a Ford Escort. I often sit cross-legged, I often sit cross-legged and go to sleep in a deep trance in a corner. Better than doing nothing.
What was the contest?
Well, I think it sounds like Balm Pot of the Month.
Well, it was, in fact, a worm charming contest. Oh. And the experts who reckoned they had a way with worms competed to see who could coax most worms up out of the ground in Chichester. It was half an hour before one small worm did pop his head up.
Well, I never...
And the nearest charmer was awarded the prize.
Well, Frank's done better than that with when you sang Mother McCree, didn't you?
Yes, indeed.
Oh.
And there, I'm afraid, we've run out of time. If you're wondering whether there's a gorilla on next door's chimney or why your postman wears odd shoes, let us know, and we'll try and work it out. For now, this is David Frost, thanking you for joining us on behalf of Ken Dodd, Bernie Clifton, and, of course, Frank Carson, Andrew Palmer and Nell Brennan, who devised and researched, and our producer, the beloved Edward Taylor. And we hope you'll join us again next time. It's time to pull the other one.
There'll be more pulling of the other one next Thursday evening at 7 o'clock when Leslie Crowther will be with Ken Dodd, Frank Carson and David Frost.
All over the country, always here with you, Radio 2.
At 9 o'clock, Rhythm and Blues with Paul Jones. But before that, an hour and a half of all that's good and great in country music with Wally Whiten.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you. And on such a dim and dismal evening, let's have something really cheerful to get us going.